Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Senak, and this will be one of the first of several tutorials that I'll be recording. This series is just going to cover Windows PowerShell. Our test environment today is a Windows Server 2008 R2 machine running in a VM and acting as a domain controller for a test domain. Now, if you're anything like me, the first time you saw PowerShell, you probably looked at it and thought, oh great, it's a blue-colored command prompt window that takes longer to open than my regular command prompt. And if you're like me, you probably ignored that. And you were sticking with batch scripting because, hey, batch is powerful. It's simple, it's relatively easy to use, and it's a good way to automate tasks. During the course of several job interviews, I realized that PowerShell is actually a skill people looked for, so I decided to teach myself. I found some tutorials online, and hopefully these videos will help you starting out with what's actually a pretty powerful scripting language. So for our first tutorial, we're going to cover just the initial setup and configuration of your PowerShell profile. Your profile is one of the most time-saving tools in your possession, as it allows you to have every new PowerShell window you open already customized with the right modules and settings loaded. To see where your profile is stored, simply type profile, and it'll tell you. Now, if you navigate to that folder, you might realize that you don't actually have that there. So what you have to do is new folder and just do Windows PowerShell. Then you can go to here, Notepad, profile. Now, when it asks you, click yes, I'd like to create a new file. Now, thus far, it's not doing anything special. I mean, you can do right host, hello world. That's simple, straightforward, and let's face it, that's the first program we all write. So let's close out of PowerShell and reopen it. We've hit our first snag. PowerShell is trying to save us from ourselves. Because by default, PowerShell doesn't want you running any scripts on your computer, which I can understand that from a safety perspective. However, I'm a sysadmin, I want to run some scripts. So, we type set execution policy unrestricted. Enter, yes, and it runs. Now, keep in mind, to set that policy, you do need to be running as administrator. So now, let's try our profile again. So, we click it. Hello world. Now, that's not terribly useful. It's nice that the computer wants to say hello to you when you first start, but it's not really doing anything for you. Well, if you look here, every time I start PowerShell, I'm starting in my users folder. And as a system administrator, there's very few times where I actually need to be doing any work there. It's usually some random folder under C drive or even a network share. So, let's go back to our PowerShell profile now and type set location. Or alternatively, you could type CD because those are aliases that PowerShell uses. So we're going to stick with set location, root to C drive. So now, exit, start it up. All of a sudden now, I've been directed right back here. Alternatively, let's say you're an administrator for an Active Directory server. Okay, so now when you open it up, the Active Directory module for PowerShell is automatically loading. And again, as someone who does Active Directory work every day, that's actually a very, very useful thing for me because when I start all of my tools in the morning, it's all ready to go for me. So that's the biggest thing that you're going to want to use with your profile. Alternatively, also, I also have a work scripts folder, or module, I mean. And that's where I keep all the random scripts that I write. Just any kind of useful tool that I make gets saved to this work scripts folder. And the cool thing there is I can have that automatically import in the same way that I have this module here imported. So it's pretty useful. You can also add functions in here to, say unload and reload some stuff or just some aliases that you particularly like. Okay, so that's the quick and dirty, just how to set up your PowerShell profile. Nothing too complicated there. You can do a lot of cool stuff. You can add functions to it. I really wouldn't. You really just want this to be a pretty basic kind of what is something that you're going to need for every time you open up your PowerShell window. So, as you know, some of the commands that I was typing in, PowerShell operates on a verb-noun system. For instance, if you type get command, it'll show you all of the commands that are currently loaded through the profiles that you have, or through the modules that you have. Now, if you look, all of these things are, verb noun. So if you look here, even just the command, get command. Get shows what you're doing, command what you're doing it to. Maybe you're adding a computer, or you're removing an item. anything like that, PowerShell, that is how it handles commands. So whereas in DOS, it would be a generic construct, and then you would use like a /R or /D, or you would use a flag to tell it, okay, here's what you're actually doing now that you've loaded this command. PowerShell works from the other direction, says, no, you need to know what you're doing, and then we'll figure out what you're doing it to later. So one of the just basic commands that you're going to want to use in PowerShell is going to be dir ls get child item GCI. They're all aliases for the same thing. And what do I mean by alias? Well, you type get alias and it shows, let's say you don't want to type, select object every time you wanted to use the select object command. Well, you can just type select because that's an alias that exists. You can create your own, and they're really, really useful. So if you look here, let's see, where do I want, like GCI right here, that's an alias for get child item. Alternatively, you can type dir, you can type ls, all of them do the same thing. See, get command, ls, get child item. It's really nice because if you're familiar with commands in a different scripting language, you can bring those over and kind of have them activate their equivalent commands on your PowerShell window. So, one of the other things that PowerShell does incredibly well is, I don't know what the technical term for it is, I refer to it as chaining commands together. And it's the idea that you can take a command and then pass that through to something else. For instance, one of the very useful commands that you'll use in PowerShell is called getMember, and that basically tells you everything there is to know about an object, what properties and methods are associated with it. Well, it doesn't do anything on its own. But now let's say I did get child item and then pass that to getMember. And you pass it using the pipe. All of a sudden now I can see, okay, there's some directories here, and this is everything that PowerShell knows about a directory. It has last access time, its full name, whether or not it exists, it's a useful thing, creation time, all of these things, and here's also methods that you can run against it. And that's how you find out. It's sort of like a help file for file types, and you can see the file type name, system.io directory info. So let's say we want to see something besides the directory info. So we're going to go back to our user profile folder desktop, test, and we have a text document. Now we can say get item, test.text, getMember, gm. Well, now here's everything that it knows about system.io file info. Well, let's say I want to see, I don't know, what's the last access time? Alright, well, let's see. So, get item property, last access time. Now we can look and see, here is the last access time. And that jives up with our last access time when we last accessed it. It's very useful to be able to get those kinds of things. Also, you can even see what you can modify on something. You can see, I can take the last access time. That's a variable that not only can I get that variable, but I can set it as well. And the way you do that, well, you do that with set item property instead of get item property. It's very, very natural language kind of work. So, that's just a quick introduction to, your first, hey, I'm just now opening up PowerShell for the first time, and I need to learn my way around. Now, one of the things from DOS, from Batch, from those kinds of languages, is that a help file was something that was much more generally associated with each command. It was robocopy /?, and that would pull it up. It was rm /?, or rd /?, or any of those things. But it was really up to the help file being dependent, like the formatting of it, everything was very dependent upon just whoever wrote it for that particular command. PowerShell, however, uses the get help command, and then you pass a command to get help. So you'd say get help, get item. And it tells you, just a real quick, it's not terribly useful, but it does at least tell you what it's doing. And it'll tell you the different kind of values you can pass to it. Alternatively, you could just type get item, put a little hyphen, and then just hit tab and see all the different things that you could specify. Now, where I think PowerShell got really, really, really nice with the way they designed their help file is they added a /examples flag. Now, if you're running this on Server 2008, these examples are already loaded. If you're running it on a Windows 7 box, just type update help, and it will update all your help files. PowerShell on Server 2008 R2 and probably 2012 don't require that. But now you can see examples of how you would use this. And there are times I've written scripts based entirely on, an idea I got from seeing an example. I mean, this right here is about as basic as this command can get. However, now you're starting to see how to access those item properties. Now you're seeing, here's how I can access a setting in registry. Here's how, I can filter out different values. And it's really nice because you can see in a practical, I could copy and paste this into my shell and run this script kind of way that, how you want to use something. So you'll probably spend, when you're first learning PowerShell, if you're anything like me, you'll probably wind up spending most of your time typing get help and a command, or typing a command and then passing it to get member. Because those two things can tell you so much about your system, about your shell, that you can really learn your way around just by those help files. Now, also what's nice is, let's say I wanted to get help with the get item property command. But I need it off to the side. I don't want it to fill up this because I want to work while I'm looking at it. So, hit tab, and you can see there's an option for online. And if you're on a Windows 7 machine where, right now I have my settings set to not allow this through. However, there we go. I fixed it before I started. Awesome. You can actually look and see, okay, so here's the full help file for this thing. And it'll tell you what kind of things are required. There's very few things that are actually required for get item property. So it makes it very easy to see real in-depth what your command really needs. And it tells you what kind of stuff it outputs. It'll tell you, here's some examples, that kind of thing. And it gives you a good idea of okay, this is what this actually does. So those two commands, get help and get member, will save you a lot of time, a lot of heartache. And really, you just need to spend some time with them and get to know them. So, with that, I think we're going to conclude our first little tutorial. On the next one, we're going to discuss the different PowerShell drives that map, as well as just kind of how to use them and what they're there for. So, thank you very much for everybody who watched. I'm going to have more tutorials coming soon. And again, if you want to send me a message, my public key's in the description field below. Thank you very much. Have a good day.